Hello everyone, today we're gonna learn to obey. You see, JavaScript is a very forgiving language. If you make a mistake, it really tries to make a correct guess about what you actually meant. But if it can't, there is high chance that instead of throwing an error, your code will simply silently fail without stopping the execution. On one hand, it's really sweet, but all those assumptions and silent fails can lead to unexpected results which can become a real challenge to debug. So at some point people decided that enough is enough and it's time to fix it. And just like that, strict mode was born.
You little scumbag! I got your name! I got your ass! You will not laugh! You will not cry! You will learn by the numbers! I will teach you!
Introducing ECMAScript 5, it applies the whole bunch of changes on how JavaScript is executed. So without further ado, let's take a look. So here I have two screens. One with regular JavaScript, which is unofficially called sloppy mode, and the other one with strict mode. Now, in order to enter it, all we need to do is to type use strict at the top of our file. This will tell the engine that all of our code is written in strict mode. If you don't want to apply it to all of your code, you can add this string as the first line of your function to limit it to this function only. But unfortunately, it works only with normal parameters. If you will try to do it with REST, default or destructured parameters, you will get a syntax error. It's also worth mentioning that modern functionalities of JavaScript like modules and classes are automatically in strict mode. Okay, so let's finally look at some examples. First change is assignment to undeclared variables. For example, I can create a variable myVar and assign some value to it. Later in my code I decide to change its value but misspell the name. In normal mode, when you assign value to a variable which is not declared, JavaScript keeps executing the code without a warning. Under the hood, it simply creates a new global variable which becomes property of window object. In strict mode, such accidental creation of global variables is forbidden, so we get reference error. The other thing strict mode fixes is different assignments which would silently fail in sloppy mode. For example, assignments to non-writable global variables like undefined or none. Here we assign number 7 to undefined. It makes no sense, but in normal mode it would simply do nothing. Undefined is still undefined, but in strict mode we get type error.
Holy Jesus! What is that? What the fuck is that?
The same error will appear if we try to modify properties of objects which are supposed to be unchangeable. For example, we can create a new object and explicitly define one of its properties as unwritable. Or we can create an object with a getter-only property. And of course, we can define the object itself as non-extensible by using prevent extensions method. As you could see, in all of those cases, when using normal mode, nothing would happen, but with use strict at the top, we get type error. The same applies to a brilliant idea of attempting to add a property to a primitive value. For example, that code normally would have no effect, but in strict mode,
right to jail, right away.
Of course, deletion of properties is also restricted. In normal mode, an attempt to delete undeletable property would simply do nothing. For example, each array has a fundamental property length. If we try to delete it, nothing happens. Length is still here. If we do the same with strict mode on, we get an error. The other fix introduced by strict mode is the way duplicate parameters are treated. Let's define a function that simply adds 3 numbers together. Normally, we would define parameters as a, b, c, but let's say that we made a mistake and instead of c we have another a. Well, now we have 2 parameters with the same name, so which a exactly am I referencing in my code? This or that? In sloppy mode, JavaScript always assumes that it is the last one. That's why here we get 11 as the result, because the last value of a is 2 and 2 plus 7 plus 2 is 11. But such code is clearly a mistake, and that's why strict mode informs us about it right away. Another thing that works differently is the way this is treated when invoked in a global context. Instead of returning global object, which is window in case of browsers, it returns undefined. It doesn't mean that window object itself becomes inaccessible in strict mode. If you execute console log this just like that, you still will get it. The point is, if you call the function in global context without any manual bindings, this is essentially undefined. In sloppy mode, it can't stay like that because JavaScript always forces this to be an object. But in strict mode, there is no such requirement, so instead of replacing this with global object, it simply stays the way it is, undefined. Another thing strict mode introduces is so-called non-leaking eval. If you never encountered it before, good, you shouldn't. It evaluates JavaScript code which passed to it as a string and then returns the result. But remember, executing JavaScript from a string is a big security risk, since it is too easy to inject a malicious code. Try to avoid it as much as possible. But anyway, let's take a look. Let's say that I'm executing this piece of code. Now I want to print out the value of x. And indeed the value is returned. The only problem is that this should never happen. Ideally, code executed inside eval should not interfere with the surrounding context, so the x variable shouldn't exist since I've never defined it outside of eval. Strict mode fixes that anomaly. Okay, now let's take a look at next difference between regular JavaScript and strict mode. Each function has an array-like object called arguments, which stores the list of values passed to that function. In modern code, we mostly used rest parameter for that purpose. But the funny thing is that in sloppy mode, if you change the value of the parameter inside the function, it will also change the value stored in arguments, so they are always synchronized. If I invoke the function with value of a equal to 5, it will indeed print out 5. But the moment I update the value of a, arguments also get updated and return the new value. Strict mode eliminates that synchronization, so the arguments always keep the original past values. As the last point, I wanted to mention that strict mode also commits to future-proof JavaScript. For example, it reserves some additional keywords that are not yet implemented in the language, but most likely will be in a not-so-distant future. Some words from that list are already implemented like let or static, and some are still waiting to enter the scene like package. So if you define a variable name package in sloppy mode, you will be fine. But if you do the same in strict mode, you will get an error saying that it is a reserved keyword. So, with that being said, I hope you have learned what strict mode in JavaScript is. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, a comment, and subscribe for more. Bye!